Okie doke. All right, so thank you, everybody. It's so fantastic to see so many of you joining. I know some of you are here because you're just curious, because you're not quite sure what you'd like to do. But I know, looking at a few of the names in here, that some of you are just really keen and dead set on studying psychology or something related at university. And so today we're just going to be going through the process for applying to study psych at university, how you can build up a really strong personal statement, and the steps you need to start really taking now in order to have a really strong application. So we'll start. I'm just going to go over to Dr. Avery. She's going to take you through the different types of courses that are available and some other really important information to consider when looking for universities. So Dr. Avery, over to you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Miss Henry. So I think it's lovely to hear that there's a real mix of you joining us here who already know, yes, it's for me, and others that don't. And I kind of just want to point out that within that realm of psychology, really, we're not just talking about pure psychology. There are so many other related courses, so many different opportunities post degree in terms of being a psychologist versus other. And over the next couple of slides, I just want to kind of share some of those headline themes with you. What you're seeing on the screen at the moment is honestly a true reflection of the endless possibilities in terms of what people go on to do after their degree in psychology. So lots will go straight into some kind of employment. Now, often with psychology, that 56% is reasonably representative of those that might take a non-chartered route. And by that, what I mean is if you want to go on to become a chartered psychologist, more often than not, you dive into continued education, which we'll talk about in a second, but not always. But that 56% represents those that may go off into avenues where they're working. It might be, for example, in HR departments, or it might be for sporting organisations, in all different types of psychology. But the employment rate, even just after graduation, is pretty healthy. And what that screams is that essentially employers respect and value psychology degrees, not just because of obviously all that psychological knowledge, but because of the very analytical research-based skill set that you develop as a psychology undergraduate. And it's particularly appealing for government organisations, and perhaps that will come up a bit as we progress through today. Lots go on to do further study, and that is essential if you want to be a chartered psychologist and you have to go and specialise in your route. And lots will remain unemployed for various different reasons. Perhaps they're taking a bit of a break, perhaps they're starting a family, whatever it may be. So what you're seeing there is essentially a really healthy sign that your psychology degree will take you to exciting places. Now, if we have a look at core psychology routes, some of you may have already heard, perhaps if your psychology teacher's been saying to you about mentioning the British Psychological Society, that to be a psychologist in the UK, and in fact, some of you may have picked up on this from one of our speakers at the Careers in Psychology event last week, in order to actually call yourself a chartered psychologist, you have to go through lots of steps, lots of continued study, and that process and that evidence of work has to be logged and approved by two very important bodies known as the British Psychological Society and the HCPC. And essentially these two bodies are there to validate and make sure that not anyone can just do a psychology degree and say, I'm a psychologist, because I'm afraid to say it's not that easy. But if you do wish to specialise and you want to go into a particular area, then have a look at this list. This is just some of the core areas of practice that you could specialise in as a chartered psychologist. So I am a chartered research psychologist. So after my undergraduate degree, I went on to do my master's degree and then my PhD. And at that point, I was continuing to log my evidence and I achieved my chartered status. But it's not just research. If you can see, clinical psychology is probably one of the most popular areas that you could possibly go into. People often think about psychology as clinical psychology and don't realise there are so many other avenues. Educational, you heard from an educational psychologist at the careers event last week. And again, forensic psychologists, health psychologists, and all of these psychologists will be chartered via this log process for the HCPC and the BPS. And essentially what it means is that you can become specialised in that area and that you're recognised and able to work independently in the UK with patients, with organisations because of that chartered status. Now, we are recognised as a scientific subject, and therefore I think part of the reason that lots of people do go on to get employed by government organisations, data crunching organisations, is because it is recognised for the heavy statistics and research nature that comes with it. But what you'll see is that when you start to specialise, once you've got through all those kind of core bits, is that actually it's the application, those areas of clinical and forensic, the application of those skills in different areas, which is where I think your passion comes alive. So is it that you want to be applying your love and knowledge of people and data to people in prisons or to people in schools? And I think that that's something that right now you just won't have the answer to. And the beauty is that most people will start with a pure psychology degree. They'll study pure psychology for 3-4 years, and then once they finish their undergraduate studies, they will think about which area they might want to particularly specialise in. But I think this is a big sign to all of us that this is an area, this is a profession that is significantly recognised as an evidence-based subject, evidence-based practice. And in order to call yourself a psychologist, a chartered psychologist, you must be registered with these organisations. And in fact, if you go along to the BPS and go to their Find a Psychologist, you literally can Google the names and registration and recorded addresses of any person in the UK that claims to be a psychologist. So all those wonderful areas that await you, but there is no need to panic and feel you've got to commit to one of those areas yet. Miss Henry, am I doing the next slide as well?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Good. Sorry, just checking. Didn't want to jump in there. Although, do shout at me if I do go too far into the slides. So I think if we look a bit more carefully about picking a course, I mentioned earlier that most psychologists will start off by going and studying pure psychology at university. And actually there is a reason for that. And that's because in order to be accredited by the British Psychological Society and then by the HCPC, you've got to demonstrate knowledge and progress in 8 core areas of psychology. And so often it makes sense to do a pure psychology course because essentially it's made up of various modules, which mean that when you graduate, the BPS say your degree is accredited, you've been taught and you now understand enough to go on to become a chartered psychologist in your specialist area. So it is absolutely critical that when you're looking for a degree course, that you make sure that that degree course is accredited by the British Psychological Society. Otherwise, there is a risk that you may end up studying for 3 or 4 years and you come out and you go, right, I've decided I want to be a chartered forensic psychologist, and actually you don't have the graduate you don't meet those graduate standards because your course wasn't recognised. It's a really simple, easy way of checking it out. You go onto the BPS website and you search for degree courses and you make sure that the one you like is accredited. And actually that link, which we will share with you, I think it's embedded in these slides, is a great place to start exploring courses because you can immediately eliminate those that are not accredited by the British Psychological Society. The good news is that most of the ones you'd want to go to are accredited, but it's always worth checking with either me, Miss Henry, or Miss Tittle just to check if you're unsure. Now, if at this point, and this tends to be the minority, but everybody has different passions, and you may be sitting there thinking, hey, miss, I've wanted to be a psychologist since forever, and I already know it's forensic psychology I want to do. So why would I waste 3 years studying pure psychology when I know that there are courses out there that are specialised? And that's true. There are lots of, certainly since my time, when I did my undergraduate studies, a long time ago, there wasn't really specific degree courses in forensic or clinical, and now there is. And the reason there is because demand has increased, and so there comes the supply, is that many psychologists are already know what they want to study and what they want to specialise in. My advice on this is that think about this carefully. Make sure that you speak with me, Miss Henry, Miss Tittle about that. If you're sitting there saying, I want to be a clinical psychologist, because our job is to challenge your thinking. And if a student ever comes to me at this point and says, I don't want to apply for just pure psychology and study that for 3 or 4 years and then decide I want to definitely do a clinical course or forensic, then it's our job to challenge your thinking. Have you really thought that through? Like, are you aware of where you might be restricted in terms of them progressing if you only do clinical? So really important you think that through. And this is not me trying to put you off, because I'm sure there will be some of you out there that really do know what area you want to specialise in already. But it's just to make sure you put that thinking through some important questions. Ultimately, guys, the truth is the way in which these courses differ, how a pure psychology versus a specific course in clinical or forensic or educational vary, is often only in the content delivered in the very final year of study. Because, as I've already said, to be accredited, you've got to cover 8 core areas. So most of the courses that are specific have to cover those core areas in the first and second year anyway. So it tends to be in that final year of undergraduate study where you start to specialise with your dissertation and your modules, where if you're doing clinical psychology or forensic, then it will be in those themes. So something really to think carefully about, because often if you're doing a pure psychology course, you could still ultimately do your dissertation on a clinical project and have the expertise without having needed to specialise in clinical. So please be mindful of that and reach out to us and we'll help guide your thinking a little bit more. As I've said, 8 core areas of psychology there, and certainly you've got pure psychology, specialist psychology, but you've got lots of other combined options as well, which I think is coming on the next slide, right, Miss Henry?
Yes, you should see it now, I think.
Great. Oh, okay, sorry. And Miss Henry, shout at me when I need to stop talking. So I've talked about pure psychology, and actually I think Miss Henry, you did a combined course, didn't you?
I did. Mine was a double degree in psychology and linguistics with applied linguistics.
There you go. So Miss Henry is a good example of a student at that time who did combine her love for 2 subjects, and I think we're going to get onto that in a second. Miss Tittle did experimental psychology at Oxford, so a very kind of pure psychology focus on that rather than specialising in clinical or forensic. I also did a pure psychology course, so I did kind of your basic Bachelor of Science Psychology and then specialised in research as my career progressed. But it may be that you're sitting here and thinking, okay, I kind of want to do something in psychology. I'm definitely not sure that it's going to be forensic or educational yet. But I kind of like psychology, but I'm thinking a little bit outside the box. What other things might be going on? And often what we've seen in the past 5 years at Caterham and nationally actually is someone's passion in psychology evolving into or overlapping with their applications for neuroscience courses. And psychology now as an A-level subject is recognised as a fantastic facilitating subject for going on to study neuroscience. So some of you may be thinking, I love psychology and I love biology and my dream is to combine the 2. Talk to us about neuroscience. Some of you might be thinking, I definitely am interested in crime and what makes a murderer and the psychology of that, but I'm less interested in the kind of biological psychology or social-ish. And you may want to start thinking about maybe how a course like sociology or criminology might be particularly more up your street, and so on. There is massive, massive overlap with psychology and business and behavioural economics. And because of the demand, there's now a huge supply of those kind of specialised courses as well. And in fact, a good number of business psychology or behavioural economics style courses are taken up by our psychology, those that have done A-level psychology at Caterham, and they're now studying in business schools, but they're studying courses that overlap their passion for psychology and those other related humanities and sciences. So talk to us more if you're not quite sure and you're not quite settled there. And these are the courses that we tend to see students at Caterham a kind of marriage, a love of psychology and other. And I am genuinely excited to see that universities have cottoned on and they're now offering an incredible range of combined courses. So psychology and English, like, are you doing psychology and English A-level and just constantly in every lesson seeing this overlap between some of the psychological theories you're learning about and the literature you're reading? How wonderful would it be to go and study psychology and English at university? You know, if you're sitting there in some of your history lessons and really thinking about the role of psychology in understanding behaviours from the past and looking to the future, why not look at that combined course as well? And so on. So, and these courses, as I've got that BPS sign up there, the good news is that immediately you might think, oh, does that mean it's no longer accredited by the BPS because it's not a pure psychology course? Not so. Most of these combined courses are fully accredited by the BPS. So long as you do your 8 core areas and then the rest of your degree is in the other subject, that means that after 3 or 4 years, you graduate with a combined degree and you're still registered and recognised for your psychology knowledge, which means that if you do then decide to go on to study psychology more, you can. So some really, really exciting opportunities, certainly changed significantly since my time, where very much it was you did psychology. And certainly that's still very popular and wise for many, but many options out there. So get researching, go onto that BPS website, talk to us, we're here to help you. And there are many other teachers in Caterham that did psychology as a degree subject, actually. So perhaps with their permission, I might share that list, or Ms. Henry can share that list, because you might want to speak to them as well as the 3 of us. Okay, Ms. Henry, am I handing back to you now or am I carrying on? Forgive me.
I think you're carrying on for another 2 slides, please.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Without you, sorry. I did have a perfect little flashcard in front of me with my slides on, but it seems to be hiding somewhere on my desk, so apologies, Miss Henry. Okay, so international study. Do you know what? This year, actually, in Upper Sixth, I have submitted 44 applications. Bearing in mind there's about 169 pupils in Upper Sixth. I've submitted 44 international applications all over the world. Not one of them is for psychology, I have to say, but we certainly do get lots of interest in international study. So maybe you're already thinking that you love psychology and that you want to go on to explore this in a different place, because actually you also love languages. And maybe you want to go somewhere where you're going to put your language skills to the test as well as studying psychology. Maybe your aim is to go somewhere in a completely different culture and geographical location, maybe it's to the States, what have you, because actually that's part of your next step, your ambitions in life, but you still want to make sure that you're studying psychology. International study is absolutely a possibility, and I really encourage you to come and speak to us if you think you might want to study psychology abroad. And the good news is that whilst the BPS don't automatically give international courses accreditation, like we talked about earlier, there is a very clean, very standardised process for when you come back from studying and you've done your psychology degree internationally, that you can essentially get the evidence of your work reviewed and via conversion route and get your degree recognised by the BPS when you return. Now, in order to make sure that you can get it accredited, it's quite simple. You need to make sure you're going and studying at universities that have a reputation and are recognised. The BPS won't simply come back and say, oh, you did some psychology in outer whatever. Great, tick. That's not quite how it works. And so you do need to make sure that if you're looking at an international psychology course, that you really carefully review the content that's covered. Now, of course, the content that covered is those 8 core areas that I mentioned earlier. And those 8 core areas are mentioned on the BPS website. We can share a link with you so you know what they are, so that if you're looking at international study, we can help you to review whether the courses you're looking at do marry up to those 8 core areas. So long as it's a reputable university, that the content due to be covered at that international course covers the 8 areas, you can get that accredited when you return back to the UK. So really exciting stuff. And in fact, some of the US courses are really appealing. So do talk to us about that if of interest. The final thing that I'm going to talk about before I hand back over are placement years. Now, placement years, these used to be known as sandwich years. So again, in my day, it used to be, do you do a sandwich year, which basically means that you're 2 years into your course, you then take a year out where you're working in industry, and then you come back to do your final year of study as the 4th year. And now these are very much known nationally as placement years. When I was a lecturer at the University of Surrey, I was head of placement years. So I worked closely with undergraduate psychologists, helping them to pick whether a placement year was right for them, where they should go. And I am completely biased because I think they are the best thing since sliced bread. But I think my bias is rooted in a lot of evidence. So let me just briefly explain that. What this means is finding a course that's essentially 4 years. You do your first 2 years studying those 8 core areas, getting the nitty-gritty, developing all your research skills. And then maybe you're already thinking at that point, oh, I've got an evolving interest in business psychology. I've got a kind of a blooming interest in educational. That placement year is your chance to go and work with another psychologist or in a related organisation where you can put all that theory and that potential career ambition into practice for a year and try it out. And placement years are fantastic. They could be that you shadow a clinical psychologist and work on a stroke rehabilitation ward for a year. It could be that you work with the police looking at data trends in terms of crime in the UK. It could be that you're working with the BBC in their innovation department, looking at how humans make decisions and how we can design the workforce to improve that flow of communication and that innovation. And most universities will have lots of contacts. So it's not like you have to go and find this amazing placement. Most universities will have their supplier list and you have to apply a bit like a job interview to get one of the placements. Although saying that, you can, if you have your own unique opportunity that you find yourself, then of course most universities will accommodate those as well. Most courses that offer a placement year are more competitive because it's a no-brainer, right? You've got a whole year's work experience. You are immediately more competitive. It's also a great chance for you to check, do I really like this area of psychology? You'd be amazed at how many of the undergraduates that I worked with at Surrey, they'd come back from their placement year and go, I definitely don't want to do clinical anymore. But for them, that experience was priceless because they're now able to shape their next career ambitions. The networks that you get in that year become absolutely, again, priceless for you to connect after your undergraduate year, maybe if you're looking at becoming a chartered psychologist. So I am biased and I do think placement years matter a great deal, I think for various reasons that I hope I've outlined. So I would encourage you to consider those. Of course, if you need to quickly move through 3 years and actually you already know that you don't want to be a chartered psychologist, but you want to go down a different route, then maybe the placement year might be not essential. But I urge you all to look at courses that do have those placement years because they are particularly important for our applied, evidence-driven nature of work. Okay, so Miss Henry, I hope that's covered those introductions there. Am I handing back over to you or Miss Tittle now?
Miss Tittle, thank you, Dr. Avery. That's fantastic.
Hello. Hello, I think I'm up next. Oh, hopefully you can see. I think my Wi-Fi just glitched. Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Avery, for an amazing introduction and so much information. So I'm just going to talk a little bit really about career options in psychology, where you could go after you've done a degree in psychology, and there are lots and lots of options. So of course, and I think as Dr. Avery has highlighted, you don't need to be choosing your career now. You don't need to be saying, I want to become a forensic psychologist, so I'm going to study a forensic psychology undergraduate, and that is my path set for me. Doing a psychology degree, I think I just want to highlight how many doors it can open up for you. So obviously, if you are taking an accredited course, which we'd definitely recommend, then you have the opportunity then, as Dr. Avery said, to specialise after that. So you can specialise in forensic psychology, and you can become a forensic psychologist. You might work with offenders, helping to treat them. You might work on interventions. You might work with the prison system or with the police in that kind of environment. Again, you could specialise in something like educational psychology. You know, if that's something that you've got an interest in, or if you find out that you've got an interest in that, maybe through, as Dr. Avery said, a placement year or something, then you can do further study. Certain areas that you might want to go into, sort of these specialised psychology areas, will require further study. So something like clinical psychology, you'll need to get your undergraduate degree. You'll then need to get onto a very competitive clinical psychology doctorate, and that may involve you needing to do a master's before that. Work experience and that kind of placement year or work that you do after your undergraduate is very, very helpful in that. Some of the things that Dr. Avery mentioned, you know, shadowing psychologists on in hospital wards or working as a mental health assistant, things like that, can be really, really helpful for getting onto a clinical psychology doctorate. So there are loads and loads of opportunities, and actually if you follow the link, I think that the PowerPoint will be sent to you. If you follow the link that's on this slide here, that will take you to a range of specialisms that you can go into in psychology. If you are interested in that, in knowing a bit more about some of the different things, then we're always obviously here to talk you through any of those, probably ones that actually you'd never even thought of. So there are jobs and things out there that that you might not even know about yet. So having a look can just get you excited in it. Maybe you know will help you decide, if you are doing one of these placement years, decide what kind of thing you'd like to do. But I just want to highlight as well that doing a psychology degree does not mean that you then have to pursue another related course in psychology, or go into a sort of, I suppose, traditionally psychology related field. There are loads and loads of other careers that really value the skills that you get from psychology. So, you know, doing a psychology degree, I think some of the skills, and this is just to name a few, but some of the skills that you come out with: analytical skills, critical thinking, reasoning, the ability to write a research paper, the ability to write a dissertation of several thousand words, to be able to put an argument together, to problem solve. These are, and that's just to name a few. These are all really, really useful skills that are valued by employers. So actually a psychology degree can open lots and lots of doors for you. I mean, some of the options are on the slide at the moment, but I think top graduate destinations for psychology in the past few years have been education. So that's maybe further education, or working in a school, or going on to study further education. Health and social work, that's maybe one that makes sense after psychology. But things like retail, so your knowledge of psychology can be applied in retail strategies. You could go and work in marketing for a big brand or something, and use what you know to improve how that product is marketed. Legal fields, all of those lengthy essays that you'll be able to write, and all that critical thinking, that is really helpful in the legal profession. Things like business, HR, human resources, working with people, psychology is fantastic for that. Finance, marketing, sales, etc. So I would definitely just encourage you to have a look, to start thinking about it. But just to know that psychology is not going to restrict you. Yes, okay, you're not going to, you're not doing a doctor degree, medicine degree or something. But it doesn't stop you, converting and then going into the legal field. It just opens lots of doors for you. Okay, I think I'm handing back over to Miss Henry now.
Fabulous. Thank you. Lots of food for thought there. And I think what Miss Tittle said there at the end is absolutely right, that psychology really opens doors. So even if you're not thinking that you want to be a psychologist at the end of your degree, it really does open up so many pathways to you, because those skills that you learn in your psych degree are just fundamental to so many other different fields. So I want to focus now on choosing a university. And I had an image here that unfortunately hasn't loaded, but in the psychology classroom, and I'll take an image and put it onto our Firefly page for you. We've got a map that highlights the top 20 psychology degrees around the country, the top 20 universities. This is a really hard choice. You know, some of you might have already decided that you definitely would like to study psychology at undergraduate. And now you need to decide where. There are 138 universities across the UK offering over 900 different psychology degrees. And so you've really got your work cut out for you here, and you have to do quite a lot of research to be able to decide and be excited about applying to study at any one particular institution. So on our Firefly page, Psychology Beyond A-Level, we've got a document there which is going to help guide your thinking. These are questions that you need to ask yourself before deciding on a university. And part of these are based on maybe an emotional response, and others are more logical. And I think a combination of the two is really important when deciding on where you'd like to spend the next 3 to 4 years. So some things to ask yourself would be obviously making sure that psychology is right for you, and combined courses. You need to consider the reputation, and this doesn't just necessarily mean where that course sits in the league tables. You need to consider some other things as well, like the teaching excellence framework. You might want to look at what pupil satisfaction surveys indicate. Are students happy about their lecturers? Are they happy about their accommodation? Are they happy about the sort of social aspects of the university? So really do your research there. You need to have a look, of course, at the different modules that are on offer. In addition to just checking that they're accredited, you just want to make sure that if you're really interested in forensic psychology, you need to make sure that they've got forensic experts there, and that in your final year, you can do some modules in that area that is of interest to you. It's worth looking at the tutors as well, looking at who's going to be teaching you. What are their specialties? What areas are they interested in? Are they good teachers, or are they just there because they need to have their research funded? So it's worth looking into who is going to be in the psychology department. If you're interested in a placement year, that's something that you need to consider as well. And perhaps study abroad options. You might be able to study abroad at some point in your degree, and that's worth looking at what institutions they have partnerships with. Obviously, location is going to be important as well. Some of you might want to be able to duck home on a Sunday afternoon for a Sunday roast with mum and dad. Others might want to be at St Andrews and be as far away as possible. And that's just your personal choice. Maybe don't share that with your family if that's the case, but that's something to consider as well. You might also want to think whether you'd prefer a city centre university or a campus university. Of course, you're going to need to consider the entry requirements as well. So for psychology degrees that are accredited, the grades range from CCC to A-star AA. I think the most common is BBB, but this is, of course, something that you will need to consider. Start looking at open days. I know Mrs. Brown works incredibly hard sending you the careers bulletins each week, and there you can find details on when the open days will be. I suspect all virtual this year, but still you'll be able to get a bit of a feel for the university there. So have a look also at university life, what's on offer, clubs, societies, sports, facilities. The student union is something that would be worth checking out as well. And you can also look at the Old Cat Society. So you could try and connect with students who have left and are now studying at these unis and ask for their honest input. You know, how are they finding their time? Are they enjoying it? Would they recommend it? And just make contact with some of them. You might want to have a look at the support that's on offer as well if you need it. Obviously, check out the accommodation. You're going to be spending the next few years living there, so you need to decide whether you're happy with that accommodation. And some other things maybe that you hadn't considered is sustainability. You might want to look at the university's green initiatives and their sustainability rankings. So just some ideas for you there. If it were me, I would be putting all of this into a spreadsheet, and I would be ranking all of my top choices on some sort of scale from 1 to 10, and then trying to do it numerically. And I think that's as good a method as any. I think especially at the moment, as you're going to have trouble visiting the universities and seeing them and getting a feel for them in person, perhaps taking a more numerical approach might be one way to go about it. But we can, of course, help you there. And I think just starting to use Unifrog to create your shortlists will just help you decide where's going to be best for you. But you don't need to make any decisions immediately. All right, some of you I know are already thinking about personal statements, and you really should start thinking about it now. This is your term. In the spring term, we don't have too much else on. You've got no mock exams. You don't have any other huge commitments. And especially now that we're in virtual school and you've dropped down to 3 subjects, most of you, you've got the time to really invest in your personal statement and build up a good body of evidence that will demonstrate to universities that you are a suitable candidate. So in terms of personal statements, and this is true of any course, universities and colleges are looking for well-written and structured statements. They're looking for evidence that you're well informed about psychology and that you've got a really strong interest in the subject. So some things that you would need to do to demonstrate this is have some personal insights into the subject. So rather than just use the same books that everybody has read, you need to make sure that you're standing out and that your personal statement is unique. You need to demonstrate how you've pursued the subject outside of school or college. So you need to really indicate to them that you have an interest and demonstrate how you've pursued it. And that could be through reading articles, reading books, signing up for some online MOOCs. It could be some online courses or podcasts. It could be doing an IRP. You just need to demonstrate your passion in as many ways as possible. It'd be really useful if you've got some work experience or some voluntary work. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. And of course, additional reading is key. They want to know that you've done your homework and that you are truly passionate about psychology. So on the Psychology Beyond A-Level page on Firefly, we've got all of this in much more detail. And so it is worth spending some time looking around that page. It's really going to help you put together a personal statement. We've got lots of examples. And so do approach us if you would like to see what others have done in the past, some other really successful personal statements, and that includes for Oxbridge applications as well. It's important to demonstrate your skills. So as Ms. Tittle said earlier, a psychology degree requires you to be research-minded, be analytical, be diagnostic, be really organised and academic and scientifically literate. So this might come from your other A-level subjects. It might be to do with your IRP, but you just need to be demonstrating these skills to show that you're suitable for the course. Of course, any work or voluntary experiences, PsychSoc presentations, we are always open to nominations. If you'd like to do a PsychSoc to get that on your personal statement, then please do get in contact with me as soon as possible. It'd be great to have some in the diary for this term. Competitions, which we'll talk about, as I said, MOOCs, any lectures, podcasts, debates, anything that you've done that really show how you've pursued your interest in psychology would be fantastic. We'll have another personal statement session a little bit later on in the year, but it's really important that you stop telling the reader about psychology. I don't know, Dr. Avery, how many personal statements we've read where the opening line is, psychology is the scientific study of the mind and behaviour. They know, your admissions tutors know what psychology is. So your job isn't to tell them what it is, but it's to tell them how you think about psychology. You know, how has it been thought-provoking and how have you then gone to research these thoughts and to read different points of view on this. So you need to just stop telling the reader what psychology is and start telling them that your unique perspectives. You need to also consider the books and the research evidence that you are putting in your personal statement. Everybody puts in Oliver Sacks's The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. Everybody has read that. Yes, it's fascinating. Yeah, it's really interesting, but it doesn't set you apart. It doesn't make you unique. And so I'd be really pushing you to start reading journal articles and some non-conventional texts. And we can help you with that, but start really thinking about what's going to make you stand out. So other things that will make you stand out is external competitions. And I know many of you were at the talk 2 weeks ago on the different competitions that are available for psychology. All of this is available on our Psychology Extension and Enrichment Firefly page. So there's links there to lots of different competitions. Most of them are due in March or the summer term, but it's something that you need to start thinking about now. So these are typically essay competitions, either giving you really specific prompts or sometimes just one word, for example, mind or time. And that from there you need to write between 1,000 and sometimes 3,000 words. External competitions are fantastic. They demonstrate all of these skills that you need to show to look like a successful undergraduate psychology candidate. And so I would highly recommend that you enter a psychology competition if you're pursuing psychology at university. We can definitely help you with that, and I'm happy to read any drafts and point you in the right direction of readings, but you need to start investigating this pretty soon. The season dries up, and so you need to get started imminently. All right, Dr. Avery, over to you, please, to talk to us about work experience in psychology.
Fabulous, thanks, Miss Henry. I found my little card now, but I have you to tell me what's coming next, so thank you. So work experience, it's such a tricky one in psychology, because there are all sorts of wonderful things you could be doing, and most of you who are aspiring psychologists want to get stuck into the most valuable experience, and often that involves you wanting to work with another psychologist, kind of shadowing them and watching what they're doing before you go off to study at university. And unfortunately that just isn't possible in many cases, and the reason that's so is because of your age, and most of the time you have to be 18 or above in order to be exposed to or work with kind of a chartered psychologist in a lot of what they're doing. However, fear not, because your time will come to do that later on in your degree, and there is still lots of things that you can be doing during your A-level studies to build an impressive work experience kind of skill set that you can either use to help validate whether you're making the right decision, and certainly to use in your application process for your courses. Now, I totally appreciate that right now this is even harder given the current pandemic and what you are or not able to do. But let me just highlight to you a few things that you may never have even thought about that could be a way of helping to populate your skill sets, particularly in terms of work experience. Now, find a registered BPS psychologist. I've kind of, there's a slight contradiction here because I've just gone, you can't do it yet. However, that's not to say that you can't contact a psychologist and offer your services on a voluntary basis to either help them with some data analysis or to help them with some marketing or whatever it may be. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a register on the BPS of every registered chartered psychologist in the UK. And whilst Miss Henry, Miss Tittle and I do not want you merging out every chartered psychologist in the UK, because we have to think about our reputation of the school and whether that's quite the right way to go about it, we certainly encourage you to do some research on that database. And it may be that initially you look to maybe doing a search in a 5-10 mile radius of where you live or the school, but you're all going to be picking up on a similar set of psychologists to do that, just to see what their areas of expertise are, because there is absolutely no harm in you reaching out. It needs to be controlled and it needs to be managed and it needs to go through Miss Henry. So you can't just, we advise not to email these psychologists out randomly without us knowing and our input, but to contact them with that support in a scaffolded way to say, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm an A-level student and I'm currently studying psychology and this is what I've loved and this is where I want to go. And you know what, if there's ever anything I can do or ever anything that you might be able to offer me in this virtual world, then let me know. And that you're very much selling your skill set. So maybe you're hinting to things you've done already, hinting about particular theories that really, really excite you. So that is possible. Now, we have had success with this before, and some students during their A-levels have been invited perhaps to help out with a presentation that a psychologist is giving. We've had some A-level pupils who've been invited to help do some data analysis for some local surveys and things like that, which really helps with those research skill sets. So certainly check that link out on the BPS website. If you're finding psychologists that you think look like you might want to contact, please send us a list of those that you want to contact, and we will help you come up with an email with the correct kind of communication to reach out to them. Bearing in mind that, don't ask for things you won't be able to get, so you won't be able to shadow them, but there are certainly other innovative things you might be able to do to work with them. Most of the other ways you could reach out for obvious psychology experience, perhaps through prisons, local NHS trusts, is all still possible for you guys. more often than not, obviously on a voluntary basis. So in previous years, we've had students that have contacted via charities, things like Samaritans or volunteering for the CJS. We've had students that have emailed and said, you know, is there any chance that I could join a volunteer team and work with some offenders? Yes, even at your age, actually, there are some organisations where you might be able to support those kind of interventions, or volunteering in terms of kind of helping those that have working in kind of antisocial behaviour, helping them with volunteering projects in your local community. All of that is possible, and you'd be amazed at how reaching out and doing some searches through your local authorities and seeing what volunteering is going on out there that you could be involved in to reach out to some of those more vulnerable populations. And again, those two links there are worth having a look at, but if you find an independent link, please make sure you're checking it out with one of your psychology teachers, just to make sure that you're not approaching something that we think might be not appropriate. Local NHS trusts, I mean, this is difficult right now, right? In previous years, I've had students in A-level who have managed to volunteer on like a stroke rehabilitation ward or a language therapy centre. But obviously this is just not going to work in the current pandemic. So that's something that I think is a bit unfortunate for you guys. However, I know that in the next few months, as we shift and moving towards summer 2022, when you guys sit your exams and go off to study, that right now it's a bit difficult, but that doesn't mean later on in a year's time that it won't be. So do make sure that that's on your agenda for reaching out to emailing contacts at your local NHS trust for any relevant work experience in those areas. And there's a few other links there that we recommend you check out. Again, lots of them are on a voluntary basis, but all of these things, either through the Tandridge Voluntary Action, the Do It, the Time Bank, all of them potentially might offer you, even in virtual form or work that you can do from home, they might offer you an opportunity to connect with people, to learn about how other psychologists or how psychology is having impact in the world, even if it means that you're doing something really mundane as part of that. It matters and it counts, and it's not only going to help you validate whether this is right for you, it's also going to contribute significantly to a more competitive application. So really important that you are not sitting there passive thinking, oh well, there's nothing I can do to get psychology work experience. To reach out, to think outside the box, to search for community projects, to look for charities and organisations that you can connect with, and with the help of us to help make sure that you're delivering that message and request in the right way to reach out, even in the current situation. Miss Henry, am I doing the internships or are you?
Miss Tiddle is. Thank you.
Hello. Hello again. Okay, so yes, I'm just going to be briefly talking about internships, what they are and what you might be able to do at the moment. So internships are different from work placements or those placements that you might do in a sandwich year at university. They are generally undertaken, if you're doing them when you're at university, generally undertaken in the summers or possibly even the Easter, if they're just a few weeks long, or you can get internships and do internships after you graduate. And once you're at university, there'll be lots and lots of information about internships, lots of opportunities, things that you can apply for, and there will be those related to psychology, but also, you know, lots of big organizations, companies, corporate organizations offer internships as a way of kind of getting new talented, you know, young people to know about their company, to know if it's an area that they might want to work in. So internships, you know, once you get to university, something that you certainly can be thinking about, and just have it on your radar. So if it does come up at university, or you can go and seek it out yourself and have a think about what you might like to do. But just to sort of tell you what you can be doing at the moment. So in terms of internships at the moment, I think the work experience route is a really, really good way, and what Dr. Avery just talked about, way of getting experience and being able to work with, if it's in any capacity with a psychologist or volunteering at charities, things like that, that kind of unpaid work experience. But there are these sort of special or specialized internships that you can do at your age. So something I wanted to bring to your attention, something called the Young Psychologist Summer Internship, offered by the Invest in Education. So this is open to 15 to 18-year-olds. So this is obviously, perfect for your age range. The difference here is that it's one that you must pay for, but the opportunity that you get is really fantastic. So you can have a look at their website, but they offer these internships for either 5 or 10 days, so either like a half-time or a full-time internship. And they have said that they're going to be running it takes place in summer, so that they're going to be running the dates this year, sort of regardless of what happens, really, whether they're going to do it virtually or socially distanced if they can. But some of the highlights of this internship specifically, you get to visit a London hospital, you get to take part in simulated patient consultations. So this is a great thing. You can't obviously be watching real psychologists do their daily work, not only because of their age, but also because of safeguarding and patient confidentiality. So this internship offers you the opportunity for these simulation consultations, which are done with actors, so you can actually have a go at sort of playing a psychologist or seeing what they would do and taking part in it. You'll learn they have different days for different things, but educational psychology, sports psychology, and they have these immersive activities. So for sports psychology, you actually get to go to a stadium and watch a team train and then think about how you can apply psychology to that. They've got forensic psychology, a simulated visit to a prison, a visit to Oxford. I mean, it sounds amazing, really, and you have opportunity to experience lots of different things on this internship. But if it's something you're interested in, then obviously have a look at that website, have a look at the dates, see if it's something that might interest you. There's another organisation called the Internship Group, who I don't know so much about, but I think that they also have internships, less so necessarily directly psychology related, but with lots of different companies, and they do offer internships for young people as well. So there's just some things that you can consider, that you can have a look at and might be able to get involved with now. Okay, I think over to you, Henry.
Brilliant. It sounds fantastic, that internship. It's an expensive one, but Caterham get a discount, but still it would be just brilliant to just fully immerse yourself in all these different fields of psychology for 10 days. I would love to do that. Okay, so we spoke about this just a moment ago in terms of personal statements, but you need to start thinking about wider reading. This is going to be absolutely crucial for you to demonstrate your passion for psychology and how you've explored it when writing your personal statement. And I can tell you what a difference it makes when students have done their research here. A student's personal statement where they've read one book and they've tried to write half of their personal statement with very loose links to this book just doesn't look great. It doesn't show that you're passionate. It doesn't show that you're actually interested and that you've done follow-up reading. So you need to make sure that you're beginning your reading now and keeping a log, so that when it comes time to write your personal statement later on, you've got all of the information readily available. I think when we talk to our upper sixth students, that's one of their regrets, is that A, they didn't start early enough, and B, they didn't record it. And so I'll give you some advice on how you can make sure that you're prepared. So what I would recommend is, yes, reading some of those, top 50 books of psychology. And yes, you should be reading Opening Skinner's Box. And yes, you should be reading some Oliver Sacks. But for your personal statement, you need to show that you've gone beyond that. So I'd recommend that you start looking at some research blogs. So Scientific American are fantastic. The BPS Digest have some really interesting articles. And so just keep an eye on those. And I put the Twitter bird there because Twitter is honestly the best way to make sure that you're always on top of any new research that comes out or any new articles that have been published. Every single day, I can get lost for hours in Twitter, and I just follow psychology related people. And so I would suggest, even if you just make a Twitter just to get some psychology feeds through, then start doing that. And you'll find that you can make links to your psychology A-level. There are links to your other subjects. And these are some really good sources of information, much better than some of those pop psychology books. So do follow these, maybe sign up for notifications so that you're getting the latest news in your inbox. Oxbridge also release reading lists, so you can find these on our Firefly page or just follow those links there. So they have some recommended reading, and that includes some books and some published journal articles as well. So I would recommend keeping a reading or research journal. Track your thoughts from now all the way through your A-level. You don't want to get to your personal statement and know that you read a book but can't remember what it was about. And some of you will have to go for interview, even if you're not applying for Oxbridge. If you're interested in studying neuroscience, you will need to attend an interview. And it's really important that you remember the books that you've read. So I'm just going to skip forward. I would suggest creating a reading log like this, where you put the dates, the title, the author, and more importantly, what you learned. What thoughts did this inspire? What did it make you think? How did it link to other things that you've come across? How did it link to your A-level? And just start noting down your thoughts here and your reflections. This is what is interesting in a personal statement, not a summary of a book or, you know, the top ideas or the chapter headings, but what it made you think. This is what we want to see. So some books, I would suggest following these links and going to the BPS Ultimate Psychology reading list. It's got recommendations there from top psychologists of their #1 psychology book. On our Firefly page, in our co-curricular area, we have our psychology book and film club. So we've got a whole list of documentaries and suggested readings. And of course, Mrs. Moore puts together the sixth form discovery list as well. So here are some suggested readings for psychology too. If you have decided that your heart is set on a particular university, then go and read up on the publications by the lecturers there. It would be very impressive for an admissions tutor and a lecturer to see that you had actually read some works that had been published by the university. And so start doing your research and start doing some relevant reading now. We have the BPS magazine. We've got The Psychologist. We've got hard copies available. But you can access the articles online as well at the moment during virtual school. And the school also subscribes to the Dynamic Learning Review magazine. So we've got Psychology Review. They've got some for other subjects too, which you might find interesting. So if you click on that link, the login details are all on the Caterham Library website. And that's specifically linked to the Psychology A-level. So there's lots of links that you can make there. All right. Miss Tittle, over to you and Oxbridge, please.
Okay, hello again. So I'm just going to take you on a fairly quick tour of the options that you've got if you want to study psychology at Oxbridge. So you've got 4 main options really. Oxford, you've got experimental psychology or psychology, philosophy and linguistics, or PPL. And then at Cambridge, you've got psychological and behavioural sciences, or PBS, and natural sciences, commonly referred to as NatSci. So being biased, I'm going to start with experimental psychology at Oxford, given that that's what I studied. So I'm just going to outline maybe how these courses differ a little bit, just a little bit on their entrance requirements, but I won't go into a huge amount of depth because you will be able to find that out online. You can follow the links on the PowerPoint, or we'll be running Oxbridge sessions as well, where you can get much more information. But for experimental psychology at Oxford then, so it's highly recommended you have at least 1 science subject at A-level, but that does include psychology. It also includes maths. So, if you're, I assume you're all studying psychology here, we don't have any non-psychology students. Apologies. So you'll be fine for the entrance requirements for that. For experimental psychology at Oxford, and also actually PPL at Oxford, you will need a prediction of A* AA in order to apply, and that's roughly what you'll need to achieve in your A-levels as well. You'll need to complete the TSA, or Thinking Skills Assessment, which is an assessment that you do before you are invited to interview, and it forms part of the decision about whether Oxford will invite you to interview. So experimental psychology is a 3-year course. In year 1, you study 3 introductory courses in psychology, neurophysiology, similar to neuroscience, and statistics. And then in year 2, you study set subjects, and that links into, because obviously the course is accredited by the BPS, so you've got those 8 areas that you need to be covering. Then in 3rd year, this is where you get loads of choice, and it's great because you can choose from a variety of these advanced options. So I chose ones in attention and a module sort of looking at therapies in clinical psychology. And then you can choose to do another subject, or you can write a dissertation, and you'll do a research project as well. So you'll get to pick who you want to be working with, what project you want to be doing, and you'll apply for those research projects and conduct a really in-depth project and write-up. So that's experimental psychology. As I said, really, really quick kind of tour of it, lots more information on the website. PPL then, or psychology, philosophy and linguistics, slightly different, but if you're studying the psychology element of that, then you will attend lectures with the EP students, psychology students, and tutorials as well. You'll pick 2 out of 3 of the options. So you might choose to study psychology and philosophy, or psychology and linguistics, as Miss Henry did in her course. You'll study these 2 in the 1st year, and then in the 2nd and 3rd year, you get to choose different modules that you'd like to take out of your 2 subjects. So you do have more choice than in the experimental psychology course. You get to choose in your 2nd year. And depending on the makeup of the course, it will either be accredited, BPS accredited or not. Obviously, if you are choosing mainly philosophy and linguistics courses, then you won't get that accreditation. But provided you've got 50% or more in those 8 key areas of psychology, then you will be able to get accreditation there. For Cambridge, then, you've got PBS or NATSCI. So psychological and behavioural sciences, the entrance requirements for this are A star AA, and I think you don't need lots of sciences for this. You don't need psychology, but it's desirable. So again, great for you guys studying it. So for PBS, in your 1st year, you sit 4 papers, including Introduction to Psychology, something similar to research methods, psychological inquiry and methods. In year 2, again, there are some compulsory subjects making up that requirement for the BPS accreditation, but you'll be able to pick some as well. And then in 3rd year, in year 3, you'll pick some different courses from a range, and you'll also write a research dissertation. So there are sort of small differences between all those courses. I'll come on to NATSCI in a moment. But just have a look at the different options that are available. For experimental psychology, you can't choose what you do until 3rd year, whereas for psychological behavioural sciences, you can choose a bit more from 2nd year. So consider those options. Obviously, if you have any interest in psychology or linguistics, or think you might have, then PPL can be a great option. Natural sciences, on the other hand, is slightly different. And for natural sciences, you will need to be studying at least 3 sciences, which does not include psychology, but does include maths. So this is only relevant if you're studying psychology plus, biology, chemistry and maths, for example. And for natural sciences, for the 1st year, you will study science courses. So you can choose from courses from biology, courses from chemistry, courses from physics, maths, things like that. But then in 2nd and 3rd year, you have the option to study some psychology alongside that. So out of however many papers you're doing, you might be able to take 1 or 2 of those as psychology papers. So that's really, if you're really interested in science, but you want to have a flavour of psychology as well. So at Oxbridge, as I say, you'll need to do an entrance test, particularly for Oxford. Some colleges at Cambridge will require that as well, and you'll need to take part in an interview as well in order to decide. In order for them to decide whether they're going to offer you a place. But once you're there, you have the tutorial system, where you'll have very small tutorials of maybe 2 or 3 of you and your peers, with one person who is a specialist in their field, and you'll have the conventional lectures as well. So I've tried to sort of cram all of that into just a few minutes. If you are interested in studying psychology or a related subject at Oxbridge, then we can certainly help you more decide which course would be right for you, and also the preparation that you need in order to do that. But it's similar to any other university, that what you need to do now, which is reading a lot, just looking at what you're interested in, and making a note of that. Okay, I'm gonna hand over to Miss Henry there. Sorry if I've gone over.
Brilliant. No, that's perfect. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so very, very quickly, I just want to make you aware that there are degree apprenticeships available for psychology related study. So degree apprenticeships are where you combine full-time paid work and part-time university study. And so you're not leaving university with a big debt at the end of it. So you've got some industry experience and you end up getting a bachelor's degree at the end. So here are some links for some psychology related degree apprenticeships. Do have a look. They are a really good option. And I think they are seen as quite competitive, and they do give you a bit of a head start. If these are the areas that you think you might end up in anyway, then I would suggest doing a little bit more research here. So do follow those links and read up a little bit more on the available degree apprenticeships. And that's it. We are available now for questions. So do hang about if you've got some burning questions you'd like to ask. Otherwise, of course, you could just email us at any time. And thank you so much. It's great to see that so many of you are considering a psych-related degree at university. That just fills us with absolute joy. We can't wait to share our passion with you. All right, I'll stop the recording now. So please jump in, use the chat, or just ask any questions.